And hello and welcome, Jakob Anker Nielsen here with my colleague Richard Smith, and we're going to run through a feature from the Washington release called performance profiling. It's in the automated test framework. I have been doing some digging into this while it is newer or newish to Richard. So the idea is we'll just run through this and have a chat about it. The first thing to note is that the performance profiling feature is an extension of the existing ATF automated test framework feature. So you can utilize all of the ATF suites and tests that you already have put in place to extend this performance profiling to. So where we usually use ATF for process regression testing, we can now also look for performance regression testing. So it's an added layer to help customers find some of the self-inflicted performance issues that can occur when we are customizing the ServiceNow platform. And currently, performance impact of customizations can be overlooked and be more of an afterthought. So this is an attempt also from ServiceNow side to make it a bit more of a standard thing to also consider performance management when introducing new changes to the platform. It is not to be considered load testing and any such thing. It is for a single user base, though we can use it on over multiple iterations, and we can get a sense of a baseline and compare it to the performance after a change. The way it works is that it will run a total of 11 iterations of your ATF. The first one is just to warm up and get the values cached, so it does not provide you with a false picture because it would be slower at that time. And the next 10, it will run in sequence doing the same steps, and it will then take an average of this as the performance value. It is important to know that system transactions, when we start the performance profiling, so the system transactions, they will be paused for a moment, or they will first complete, and then they will pause while the performance profiling is running, being executed. That is to make sure it is not polluted by any other slow queries and so on that might happen at the same time in parallel. So it's worth keeping this in mind. And in fact, you also need to check a box saying that I'm conscious that I will be pausing all other stuff for a moment while we do this testing here. Therefore, I would suggest it's suitable for sub-production and ideally a staging environment that is near production in terms of the infrastructure underneath and the so it's a mirror as much as possible without actually impacting.
The first of those transaction runs, if that were to fail, if the ATF test were to not succeed, would that prevent the subsequent runs from executing it? So it's only on success of the initial. Okay, that makes sense.
Yes, if any of the 11 iterations should fail, it will abort the subsequent iterations. I guess that's a good thing as we are pausing the system.
Yeah.
So finally, we are using something called Cloud Runner to achieve this. This is a feature developed by ServiceNow where you are also able to automatically generate some automated tests from. And essentially, the reason for using Cloud Runner is that it kind of hosts the test outside of the client where it's being executed from, because this will introduce some variance in terms of network connection and browser that you're using and so on. So it will be standardized across all of the different tests, disregarding who is executing them and from where. This is what it looks like when we go into an ATF. You can go both from an ATF suite and do an ATF performance suite test, or you can do it on a test level as seen here. You can see the run performance button in the top right corner, and you can see that you would need to press Cloud Runner, as well as that you acknowledge that you are indeed pausing the system. This is how it will look once it is running. So you can see that we have the warm-up progression, and then it will run through each of the different 10 iterations after this fact. And upon the completion of the test, you would be able to find the values in a related list and compare up to just 2 of them. That does make some sort of sense. I wonder if you could do some reporting on it, as well, as it should be data inside of the system if you were interested in doing this. However, the default functionality is that you can compare 2. You will need to have the of course automated test. You will need to have installed, as well as the ATF generator and Cloud Runner version 2.0 or greater. For resources, we have performance profiling that can be found on documentation of ServiceNow, and there is also a landing page for automated test framework for support and troubleshooting. So that's the product, which I sadly cannot show right now, as my Cloud Runner is in the midst of being installed. Though I hope, Richard, it gave you an idea of what the product is supposed to do, at least.
Yeah, no, it's really useful. Like I said, I think the important thing on testing this is to understand in which instance it's appropriate, because of that impact, that pausing, and potentially that, especially if you're running a suite of automated tests with performance on, and that suite is quite extensive. It might be quite disruptive on other processes and other people on the instance that we're running it on. So we need to be mindful. My first thought is potentially justification for a dedicated performance instance in the to one side of the release stack. Yeah, because that enables you to do that with impunity, right? And make sure that you're not impacting anybody else.
Yes.
Kind of like
goes back to the point of having a staging environment.
Yeah.
It will also enable the support to determine if there is a performance degradation, in fact, without disrupting the actual production, also taking out the variance of the end user's client setup.
Yeah, I mean, we've been explicitly asked by this by a number of customers wanting to understand the performance of their incident process, for example, as you said, going through processes to, especially in large environments and with many teams working in the same sort of space. All too often, those performance issues don't manifest themselves until you get into a production environment, because no dedicated performance testing on those sorts of things is done. But yeah, no, it's quite welcome. I'll be playing around with that, most definitely.
Yeah, for sure. So how I will see it, and it's also written in the documentation, it's an obvious candidate to run on major upgrades. And what about, do you also see it as a feature that could be used for standard and normal changes, or maybe only your normal changes, or both? How would you see this?
I think it feels to me more like it's part of the release process itself. I mean, if a new capability or feature is being introduced, and then obviously developers and teams should be encouraged to consider the performance impact of what they're doing. And now items which have been thought through and considered for having impact can be tested singularly, right? You can say we don't want to wait until the end of a sprint to test this feature. We want to try and get some sense of the performance before we reach the end. So I'd see this as something that's probably linked to the sprint cycle itself. So we get a sense of how their performance is changing over time. But I see no reason that it can't be used in that way as well.
It's interesting when you put it like that. You can almost use it as a part of your development if you have slow queries and you have an initiative to optimize your dashboards. You would be able to run a test, do changes to your queries, run the test, and see the trend, what is most optimal for you.
Yeah, interesting.
All right, that I guess will be the end of this product highlight. Thank you, Richard.
Pleasure. Thank you.